everybody, it's Serena from Spin and Dye in Texas, and this is our Quaruntine Fiber Group meeting week 3, I think. Seems like it's going on for a while, but you know what? We're all here. We're going to have fun, and I'm excited. I'm doing the same demo today that I did in our meeting on Monday, but I'm using some different colors, so hopefully it'll be easier to see on camera. And we'll talk about kind of the like what I've changed and what we're doing the same in just a second. But these are the colors I chose here. So we've got a pink, a royal blue, and a nice light gray that we're going to work with. So before I do that, if you were not in Monday's meeting and you missed it, I did finish the yarn that I was working on. Let's see, there we go. The yarn that I was working on in our first Thursday meeting, and I chain plied it, so it's a nice 3-ply yarn that I finished up with. I got to keep those really pretty color transitions, and you can kind of see it on the camera, but it's a lot of deep blues, deep greens. So I'm absolutely in love with how it came out. I cannot wait to think up a project for it. And I just wanted to share with you what my progress has been in our meeting so far. And please feel free to share with me your meeting, what you've been able to complete in our time together and what you're working on now and anything like that. You can find me on Instagram at Spin and Dye in Texas, or just drop a comment in this video or in the live chat and we can talk about it. So today, we are, like I said, doing the ribbon weaving again, and I'm just going to do a quick overview for anyone who may not have caught the first video. So I have 2 pieces of paper pinned to a foam board. Now my foam board is one of those pieces that you use in a yoga studio or something like that, or on a child's floor to keep it from being too hard for kids to play on. And I picked up a 4-pack of these at Aldi for $10 a couple months ago, and they have been very, very useful. But if you do not have foam board, do not worry. You can also use just a nice piece of cardboard, something to cushion, because you're going to be sticking a lot of pins in and you don't want to pin the surface underneath, of course. And also you want it to have structure to it. So another piece of fabric or several pieces of fabric would likely start to buckle inward as you are working. So the recommendation is that you use something more firm, and I have seen cardboard work successfully with this. The other tools I'll be using is I'm using a very long needle that my husband 3D printed for me to weave my ribbon through as I go. However, if you do not have a husband with a 3D printer, no worries. Again, you can use cardboard for this. Just cut it, make sure that you have a slot in the top, just like mine does here, that you can run your ribbon through, and that it's a firmer piece of cardboard. Another option is there is a professional needle that you can purchase called a wefty. I have not used that product, so I don't know for sure how effective or what frustrations you might run into, but there is that option as well. I'm also using some interfacing. The interfacing that I'm using is 931. I know nothing about interfacing, so if you think that there's one better for the ribbon that you're using, please feel free to use it. It's absolutely fine. I have a marker for marking off the grid that we're going to do in a moment. I have a compass for that grid as well. Now this compass, again, my husband 3D printed for me. It's pretty cool. You can get all different angles out of it. But if you don't have one, you can search online on Google for a 30-degree angle, print that out, and use that to mark off your grid. I also have quite a few pins. Now I do not have a pin cushion because I don't use my pins very often, so they just stay in my nice little plastic case here. But I will set some up on the foam board as I go because they're easier to grab that way. And lastly, I have ribbon. I'm using 1/2 inch ribbon for this one. And as you can see, we have a blue, a gray, and a pink. You can use any colors that you want. Keep in mind that you want to keep something that's a dark, a medium, and a light color. You can get away with doing it other ways, but with a dark, a medium, and light, you're going to get the greatest effect of the tumbling blocks from the weave. Now, this is an example of one that I did recently. This one, I used multiple colors, so I have that rainbow effect across the top of the boxes. That's also an option. This pattern you can do pretty much anything with once you understand it. But for the purposes of our meeting today, I'm just going to use 3 colors because, oh, come on, sit up. There we go. I'm just going to use 3 colors because I think it's easier to see and kind of follow what I'm doing. So we're going to, oh, and one last thing. I am not in any way, shape, or form calling myself an expert when it comes to ribbon weaving. This is something that I've just picked up in the last month or so. And so I am sharing it because I had so much trouble trying to find patterns and information online. I found one really good source here on YouTube, Mr. Domestic, but that was the only one that I found. So that's kind of why I'm sharing as I go versus, oh, I'm an expert and I'm going to teach this to you, because when I got excited about it, I could only find one person who explained it, and he explains it very well, but I think everyone learns a little differently. So because I'm not an expert, I do have my pattern written out, sitting right here next to me, and I will be referencing that as we go through. Oh, and a pair of scissors. You do need a pair of scissors. I forgot to mention that. All right, so I have already blocked off my grid with about 2-3 inch blocks, just to give me a starting point. And I think we all kind of know how to do a straight line, so I thought I would do that early. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 30-degree angle lines. So real quick, the 2-inch blocks that I'm doing is just kind of based on the fact that I'm doing a 10 by 10 inch piece. If you were doing a larger piece or using very thin ribbon, you might want to make a smaller grid, and that's fine as well. So I've got my compass set at a 30-degree angle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up along the bottom of my grid so that my angle cuts across that first block on the left-hand side. And I got my marker, and I'm just going to mark off that angle. Now you'll notice that my compass here is not as long as my piece. That's fine, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten my compass out so I have a nice straight line. I'm going to line it up with that 30-degree angle that I just traced on there, and I'm going to slide up about 2 inches and do another one. And I'm going to do this across the entire piece, my entire grid that I have here. These guidelines are going to help us to keep the ribbon at the right angle as we weave it in. And that angle is very important because that's what creates the optical illusion of those tumbling blocks. So I have these lines almost finished up here. I just need to, I came out a little bit short, so I'm just bringing it to the corners. Okay. Now we need to do the opposite side. So we've done the angle going from top left to bottom right. Now we need to make lines going from bottom left to top right. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that 30 degrees. Since I'm going the opposite way, I got to go. Where did my 30 degrees go? Oh, there it is. There we go. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. line it up, and mark off my first line there. Take this and straighten it out. I am a firm believer that if you can find ways around buying new tools, that you should give it a shot. And that was what I did with this. The way my husband's 3D printer works is it can print something that's 7 inches long, basically. And so that is the length I had to work with for my husband to print this out for me. And I just find a way to work around it in order to get what I need versus having to go out and buy something else, especially right now when we're not really supposed to be going out unless we have to, right? So just bring those lines back to the edges there. There we go. Oh, I'm gonna put one more in there. And voila, I'll show you what this one looks like. And from here, these grids are going to help guide our ribbon. This grid is going to help guide our ribbon. Now, the other thing that I would then do is cut out the interfacing that I'm using in order to fit the piece that I want to do. I've already done that for this one, so I'm going to go ahead and switch out, but keep in mind that this is where you would put the interfacing down if you were going to use it. So I'm going to set this one aside, just tuck it over there, and do a little bit of that fun TV magic, and voila. So let me hold this up so you can see it. So you can see, knocking myself in the head there. Okay. So you can see, here is my interfacing. And then underneath over on this side, you can kind of see the shadow of that grid that I have underneath. Then I have already put the warp ribbons down just because it's faster and I think it's kind of boring to watch someone cut off warp. But it's just a straight up and down, all one color. I start with the dark color, then we're going to move to medium, then light. So it's straight up and down, a pin on each side, and you're done. Okay? So next up, we need our ribbon. So we did dark. Now we're going to go to medium. So I've got this real nice bright pink. It's almost bubblegum pink, but a little bit richer than that. So I'm going to just tuck that tape to the side. Now, my ribbon has this foam, styrofoam in the center instead of being like on a traditional spool. But what I've discovered is I set it down, and you could do this. Here, let me put it up here so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. You can do this if your ribbon is on a traditional bobbin too. I take a pin and I put it down the center to anchor it, and now I can just keep pulling it off without it flopping all over the place, which is how I prefer things to be, because if not, the ribbon will fall on the floor across the across the house, and I'm back to winding it back on the spool. So I work directly from the bobbin. I'm not going to cut until I have measured it off on the piece. So I'm going to grab my needle here and run the ribbon through the back, and that's why you need to have that slot up there for your ribbon. And you want to make sure that your ribbon your slot is wide enough for the ribbon, or very close to it. If it's a little bit more narrow, that's okay, but you don't want to have to fold the ribbon in half to get it through the slot. So the first pass of this weft, and we're going to call this weft 1, because in a while, we'll move on to the silver or the gray, which is weft 2. So first move with weft 1 is I'm going to go, and I'm working right to left, not left to right. So starting at the right side, I'm going to go over the first, bring it in here. Okay. I'm going to go over the first warp. I'm going to go under the next 2 warp ribbons, over, under 2, over, under 2, all the way across. And don't worry about lining up the angle. You can do that once your needle has gone all the way through the project. You can also use a very large, if you have a tapestry needle for tapestry weaving, that will work as well for this. You don't want something that's too fat. Look for a flat tool versus a very round tool because it'll affect your warp as you're going through, particularly because in this case, we're looking at things being held down with pins, and those pins come out and go back in throughout the project. So I've gone over 1, under 2, over 1, under 2, over 1, under 2, all the way across. Now I'm going to pull it through, and now I'm going to find those angle lines in the grid that I created that's sitting underneath the project, and I am going to line my ribbon up with that grid. Now, if you're not sure, you can always kind of peek inside, pull one of the warp threads and peek to make sure that you're sticking with that line the way you want it to be. Here, we can even try, let me pull it down so I've got it. There, you can see that one even better. Okay, so once you've got it lined up on that line, you've got that 30-degree angle, you can grab a pin, put the pin in at an angle opposite the direction your ribbon will be pulled in. Because if you put it at the same angle, you get more shifting throughout the project. And that's just something that I've noticed throughout the few of these that I've completed. I've done about 6 or 7 of them so far. So I am going to now snip. When I snip my end, I want to make sure that I have just enough of a tail on that piece of ribbon that I can stick my pin in, and I don't have to worry about the ribbon pulling through or tearing. All right, so we're in there, we're moving, and I'm going to keep going. Now I'm on row 2. So that was row 1, over 1, under 2, over 1, under 2. On row 2, we're going to do under the first warp, over, hang on, I'm reading my notes here because this doesn't really make sense. Okay, we're going to go under the first warp, over the second warp. Then we are going to continue the pattern from the previous. So then we're going to go under 2, over 1, under 2, over 1, and so on and so forth. Oh, and if you can't find anything that will work as a tool, you can also do this by hand with maybe a safety pin on the end of your ribbon just to give you something to grab onto. Just keep in mind that that can make it a little bit more tedious and a little bit less relaxing. Now, one other thing to think about, so I've gone under 1, over 1, under 2, over 1, under 2, over 1, under 2, over 1, all the way across. Now, it just so happens to have worked out so far where I have the perfect amount of warp threads that I'm able to complete the under 2, over 1, under 2, over 1 on both of these passes. However, if you aren't able to complete it, if you go over 1, under 1, and that's the last warp ribbon that you have there, that's fine. You can stop at that point and just pin it and move on. I will also add that when I'm pinning, I'm making sure to do so giving not even a tug, just a little pull on the ribbon to try and keep it as flat as I can, because it goes under a lot of stress as we continue through this. And so the more taut or and flat you can keep the project now, the easier it's going to be when we get to using that gray. So we're on to row 3, and this is the last row in the pattern, and then we're going to repeat that pattern. So after I finish this one, I will lift up the board to show you guys. So we did over 1, under 2, then the next one was under 1, over 1, and now we're going to do under 2, and then over 1. So we're going to go under the first 2 warp ribbons, over 1, under 2, over 1, and continue that pattern across. So basically, what these 3 rows are doing is they are shifting by 1 for each row, okay? And you'll see when I lift this up, and you can probably see it a little bit in the camera, although I know I'm kind of covering it up trying to get this through. But it starts to create a diamond pattern that lays the foundation for our boxes. Oh, and this is a perfect example. So I was completing the pattern going under 1, over, going over 1, under 2. But on this last warp ribbon, I could only go under 1 and then I was done. That's fine. I'm just going to pin it off and move on. So, got that pinned. Let's drop a pin in the other side here. And snip it. I do try and snip close, but like I said, not so close that my pin might not have a good place to hold on. So, this is what we have so far. And you can start to see these diamonds taking shape. So this was my first row, second, third. And if you notice, all we did was we shift the start by 1 step each time. And that gives us this nice angle and starts to create the pattern. So, and I do have my ribbon on the pin. It's just down here because it's easier for me to grab, but it is keeping me from having to chase it all over the house. So I love that. So I'm going to keep following that pattern up, and then we'll talk about what to do on the opposite side before we move on to the next step. Here we go. So I've got this going, and we're just following that same pattern in order, so I'm not going to make you guys listen to me count every single time, but we're just going to keep going up. These are really fun to do. I think the most interesting thing about it is it's something exciting with a different flair than crochet, knitting, and even weaving on a loom. But you get these really great pieces when you're done that give you that make great gifts, anything like that. I have been framing mine like you see over here. My mom who's a quilter, she suggested that I use them as pillow fronts and do a piece of fabric along the back. I haven't done that yet because I don't know how to sew. I'm sorry, but I don't. But I think that's a great idea as well, and is something that could really spice up a room, especially a kid's room, something like that. It would be really fun. I made one as a wedding gift for a friend of mine that I'm framing and going to send to her. And it's all just, it's just a fun new project to work on. And it's quick. I think the one that I posted yesterday and that announced this video, the orange, red, and yellow one, took me total about 3 hours. So and that's for a 10 by 10 inch piece. So it's not something that's going to take up weeks and months for you to get back to and finally finish. And so I really like that. The ribbon that I'm using is a two-sided ribbon, so it has a satin side and a matte side, and that's why I was having to twist that, because I had the matte side showing instead of the satin side. But you can use double-sided ribbon where it's shiny on both sides if you wanted to. You can use matte ribbon. I just like the effect of the shine. I think it makes it look like it's more foil or metallic. The only ribbon that I would not recommend for this is ribbon with wire in it, because the wire, you're moving up and down, and it's a subtle movement, but it could be enough to cause that wire to buckle and get stuck, and then you would have trouble flattening it out. So I wouldn't recommend wired ribbon, but other than that, pretty much anything you can use. Now, you'll notice that I just pulled this pin out up at the top because I was going to run into it. So I'm going to make sure that I'm still following my pattern. Tuck this down. And then I'm just going to give a little push on the end there and put here so you can see. So I'm giving a little push on the end, and then I'm going to put my pin back in, and I'm putting it at the angle opposite of the warp thread or warp ribbon, and that way it's going to hold both pieces in. And it's just because I was going to run into that pin, and I don't want to go over the pin or anything, because then that's going to give me too much slack on my weft here. So, whoop. All right, slide that down, drop another pin. So yeah, don't use ribbon that has wire in it for this project, because I just have a feeling that it would be more frustration than it's worth. However, you can use other items altogether. You can use fabric that is folded so that you don't have raw edges on the fabric, cut into strips, and you can use that. You can, in fact, Mr. Domestic, the video that I was telling you guys about earlier, that's how he did it, and his are very, very pretty. You could use paper if you wanted to. If you have kids and construction paper, this would be a great way to get them into the fiber arts, especially while you have so much time at home together right now. You can do, anything is possible. Outside of using something that's too firm to be flexible enough to bend through your warp, you're pretty much good to go. So get creative with it. I am all about finding new materials, finding new ways to use old materials. It's always exciting when it happens. It doesn't always work out, but it's worth trying because it gets your creative juices flowing, you know? I'm going to need some more pins, so let me pull some out. I hope you guys are all having a lovely week. We are almost through this week, it being Thursday and all. And we're moving through April already. I just cannot believe it. Cannot believe it. I feel like this year is going by very quickly, and at the same time, somehow very, very slowly. So I am excited that it's Thursday, because I think this weekend I'm going to go clean out the garage, and I'm very, very excited about it, which I know is a weird thing to be excited about. I love having a clean garage. Don't know why. Really don't, but I love having a clean garage. So I don't think I mentioned it before, but one thing I do with my pins, since I don't have a pin cushion, is I pin them in to my board so that they're easier to grab than trying to stick my fingers in there and constantly poking myself, which I won't admit to how often I've done, because I think it would be a little bit embarrassing. So I'm going through and just continuing this pattern across, and that diamond shape really starts to come to life, or diamond pattern really starts to come to life the more rows that you do. After about 3 rows, I think it really stands out. And this this needle that my husband made me, there is something so convenient about having a 3D printer in the house. And I don't understand 3D printing at all. I don't know how to do it. I don't understand 3D modeling. It's all over my head. And so sometimes I'll ask my husband if he thinks he can make something for me on the printer. And I'll say, well, I need a needle, and it needs to be long and flat and kind of bendy. And he's like, bendy is not something that you model. Could you give me a better explanation than that? And so I have to kind of rethink how I'm explaining things to make sure that they make sense from a modeling perspective, I guess, and not just a crafting perspective. Because having a little bit of flexibility to it helps with weaving into the ribbon. So I wanted it to be thinner, and that was what it turned out the proper phrasing was. He said, oh, so you want something that's thin and flexible? Yes, bendy. Like I said, bendy. So it worked out, though. He prints the coolest stuff for me. So I love it. And I have been using a lot of the stuff that he's made for me lately because I've been doing a lot of spinning and a lot of crocheting. So I've gotten to use several of these cool tools that he's managed to create or just find the pattern for and print so that I can create the stuff that I want to create. It's all very exciting. Which, update on my hat project, and if you don't know, I am working on making hats, scarves, hopefully gloves and socks as well, things that shelters will start to ask for in the fall. I'm going to do fleece blankets for the animal shelters, which is something I do every year, but I'm going to try and double up on my available blankets for donation this year. So I have not gotten to the fleece blankets yet. I had hoped to do that this week, but I got a little bit distracted with some other projects that I'm working on. However, I do have several hats done. It has been a great thing to do in the evening while I'm just chilling out watching TV and that kind of thing. So I've been doing about a hat a day, which I'm pretty proud of myself on because for me, that's a very good productivity. I like crocheting. I'm a good crocheter, I would say, but I'm not necessarily a speedy crocheter. So getting through a hat a night for me is pretty good time management on my side. So that's where I'm at so far. I'll probably bring the hats out one of our meetings so I can show you guys just what I'm working on. The first few hats that I did were the basic burnout hats, and I think I talked about that on a previous video. I am moving on and doing using some fingering weight yarn, and I've done a couple different patterns so far with the fingering weight yarn. And see, so I have this bad habit of creating more work for myself or starting a project and then coming up with 47 more projects to work on as a result of it. And so I was making these hats and I'm using my hand spun yarn because I have a lot of it, first of all. And second of all, because I just think it adds a nice touch. And I want to give the hats to charity. As I was working through the pattern, I'm thinking, oh, I remember when I spun this yarn. I love this yarn. It was so much fun to spin, blah, 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 you know, going down memory lane as I'm sitting there crocheting. And I was getting a little bit sad that I wasn't going to have a good end product that I could keep for some of the yarns that I really like. And what I ended up deciding to do is with whatever's left in the ball or cake, when I'm done with my project, I make granny squares. And after this is all over and I've got all my hats done and hopefully some scarves and things like that done, I'm going to take all those granny squares and I'm going to make an afghan with them. And then that way I will get to keep the memory of the yarn that I've spun and still get to share by creating the donations that I really want to create. So I am excited about that. It adds an extra step to every hat that I make, but I think it's worth it in the end because it adds that memory as well. So I'm almost done with this side. I'm not going to go all the way across the whole piece because it will take a little bit too much time. I am going to do we'll talk a little bit about what I would do in the opposite direction, and then we'll pull out that gray. And I'll show you what you do with the second weft. So I've got one more to do here, and I think we'll be good. So I don't know. I think I'm saying so a lot. See, I find words and I decide that I like them a lot, and then I just can't stop saying them. And it changes every day. I almost said so again. I apologize about that, but I'm going to keep going here. I think we all are looking for fun and creative ways to stay busy or be entertained during our quarantine. Whoops, that's the wrong needle or pin. And I am going to give you guys 2 recommendations right now. Feel free to take them. Feel free not to. If you are looking for something just to make you smile, just happy, and you haven't watched it yet, the Good News Network that John Krasinski is doing from The Office, absolutely adorable, sweet, fun. It just makes you smile. It's just happy. So recommend that one, especially if you're feeling down in the dumps. It is on YouTube, so you can just go and subscribe to the channel, get notified, same way you do with me. The other thing is we have a group in Austin called the Master Pancake Theater. And if you ever watched Mystery Science Theater back in the day, well, they have a new series on Netflix, but if you ever watched it and enjoyed it, it's basically that, but usually live at a local theater. So what they've been doing is they have a channel on Twitch, and Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, they are releasing pre-recorded videos of films that they were riffing on. And it's so fun to watch. We watched Twister on Sunday, and last night we watched Fast and the Furious 5. And they're making jokes the whole time, and my husband will pop a bag of popcorn, and we'll just sit down, and it's just like going to the movies and getting to see them live, but we're stuck at home. And if you don't live in Austin, I highly recommend just watching them just for the chance to see it, because it's so cool. And I think the only time they've traveled, they went to California once. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the case. So Master Pancake Theater on Twitch, absolutely hysterical. Not safe for kids though. Just an FYI on that one. I would not say it's safe for kids. Okay. So moving back to our piece here. So I have finished all the way up to this top corner. Now, if I wanted to go down, which normally you would normally do this pattern all the way across. We're going to follow the same pattern we did moving up in reverse below the line where we started. So I started at 1, which was over 1, under 2, and then I went to under 1, over 1, and then I did under 2, over 1. So now we have to do it in reverse. So now I need to do under 2, over 1. Now I'm only going to do 1 here because you have the pattern already earlier in the video. And we're just doing it in reverse. So you do under 2, over 1, under 2, over 1. And that way the pattern continues and is consistent across your whole piece. If you were to go below the line that you started with, the row that you started with, and continue the pattern as you were doing it above that line, then you're going to have a very marked change in your piece right down the center. You don't want to do that. So I just go through and you just do the pattern in reverse below the line where you started. Oops, I got stuck there. So it came off my needle. I'm going to try and just grab it here. There we go. Pretty close to the end. Now, like I said, normally you would finish this piece all the way across. We are not going to do that today because I am a little bit too talkative and we are going to run out of time. And I do not want anyone to be stuck here when you have other things to do. This is fun and a good escape for all of us, but it's not the only thing you're doing today, I'm sure. So try and keep that in mind as I go through, and I try and keep us real close to an hour. We might go a minute or two over today, but nothing more than that. So normally this would all be done. We've got half done, and that's going to work just fine for the demonstration. I'm pulling out my last color. It's this silvery gray color. And pulling the tape off of the end. There you go. Got it in my pin. Well, actually, so this part is a little bit more confusing. If we look at the section that we've completed, what we are looking for when we start our second weft, the gray that we're using, is we're looking for 2 diamonds that are next to each other, not diagonal, but that go straight across. So these 2 diamonds, then we're going to cut over these 2 warp threads and go into these 2 diamonds, okay? So we're looking for 2 diamonds next to each other. Mr. Domestic also noted that this creates a Z. So if I start here, I go across, down, across, and I've got a Z. I have trouble seeing those Z's, so this works better for me. But if you can see those Z's, look for that as well. So across, down, across, or 2 diamonds next to each other. So I've got my gray. It's on my hook or my pin. I'm going to load it up on my needle. Whoops, there it goes. All right. So I've got the 2 diamonds that are next to each other. So I am going to go over and then I'm going to go under those 2 diamonds. And I'm going to pop back out and go over these 2 warp threads. So when I go under those 2 diamonds, I'm only going under the where the weft appears. I'm only going under the weft, but above the warp thread, the warp ribbon below it. So I'm in the diamond. And here, maybe I can even, so you can kind of see. So I'm in the diamond, under this warp here, under this weft here. Now I'm going across, and I will be going into, there we go, okay. I will be going into these next 2 diamonds. So in, over the 2 warps, under the 2 diamonds, over the 2 warps, and I've made it to the other side. Now I'm going to wait to show you guys this until I can, until I do the next row, because then you can really see the boxes, and it, I think, is the optical illusion is very clear. So again, you will have to share pins and kind of pull pins out and put them back in. And you just want to make sure that you're still keeping a little bit of tautness on your piece. because the more taut you can keep it, the easier it is, especially when you get to this part, and especially when you have your whole piece already completed with that first weft, because when you are going across, you're just adding more and more ribbon in there, and it just messes with your tension. So try and keep things as taut as possible. I'm going to do the next one, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look for where I see two, whoops, sorry. I'm going to look for where I see two diamonds next to each other, and that's what I'm aiming for. So I'm going to come in here. And the other thing is, once you have that first weft in, once you have that first row in, the other thing to keep in mind is that your next row should lay flush with the previous row. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in just a second here. But it's another good way to guide and make sure that you are following the appropriate steps, because if you don't, things don't lay next to each other. And again, you lose that optical illusion and it starts to look like something different. And if you're going for something different, that's fine. But if you're going for the tumbling block pattern, you want to make sure that everything is sitting next to each other. So let me show you what this looks like here, because we can start to see the boxes appearing and get a feel for the pattern, a little bit better feel for the pattern. Let me turn it that way. Okay. So here is my first row of silver or gray, and here is my second row of the gray. Notice how the two grays over on the edge here, you can't see the separation in them. They're sitting one right on top of the other. And so when I come in, I need to make sure that my ribbon that I'm working with, my weft that I'm working with, is following, butting right up against that line that I put in earlier. And that way you can start to look for gaps very easily. As you continue going and the boxes become more and more obvious in your piece, it also makes it easier to spot where mistakes were made. So if you miss a row by mistake, it's going to be off to your eye. Now, when you're looking at a piece down here, you have very limited vision and you can miss where the error is, even if your eye is just not sitting right. So what I recommend is standing up and looking at it from across the room, or looking at it just from a few feet away, because you get to take in the whole picture, and where that optical illusion is broken up by an error or a mistake, it's going to pop out a lot easier for you than when you're right on top of it, because you don't want to analyze something like this in little 2-inch pieces all the way across. You want to analyze it as the full piece. Oh, hi, Marla. I'm glad you made it. It's all right that you're late. We're just going over what we did on Monday. Same thing, but we're using some different colors. So hopefully it's coming across a little bit better on the camera today. Almost said tonight. It's not night yet. So we're in the first weft, we had that really easy to remember pattern. This is more of a feel your way through. There is a pattern there, but I think it's harder to see because the piece is getting busier as you go. And so it's easier to do it by look and feel than it is to try and count your way up. Because just especially if you're using bright pieces or shiny pieces, which makes me sound a little funny, I guess. It sounds like I'm saying, oh, too shiny, I'm distracted. Technically, that would happen to me. I'm not going to lie. But it's also true. So I will take the hit on being being easily distracted to also say, yeah, but it's true. All right. Nope, I'm running out of pins. We're going to have to set some more up. Let's see. So I'm trying to decide what I want to work on next week. I've been trying to switch it up every week for a couple reasons. One, because this is a fiber group and I don't, we're not just limited to spinners or crocheters or anything like that. And two, because it's more fun for me to get to plan different projects to do with you guys. I'm thinking I might do braids, 8-string braids, because that one's fun and it's also something else that you can pick up from home right now without having to invest in a lot of new materials that maybe you don't have access to while in quarantine. So I'm thinking I might do braids or I might do more spinning. I'm not sure which one. We'll just have to wait and see, but we will have our meetings again next week. Like I mentioned, we're doing this every week through at least the month of April, and more accurately through the quarantine. And that way we can all get together, take that time to relax, chill out, and just do our favorite hobbies, learn a new hobby maybe. Love to hear about what hobbies you guys are working on, of course, as always, because there's just, it just erases all the stress, I think, when you can do something you love, whatever that is. But let me know if there's something you guys would like to see on these videos or a project that you're like, man, I've always wondered about felting, or I've always wondered about doing 8-string braids or whatever. I can't promise that I know how to do it, but I'm willing to learn with you guys. And I'm willing to do a little bit of research, come back the next week and show you what I've learned so that we can all grow together in our fiber arts. So please let me know if there's something that you'd like to see. The only thing I can't do, and this is not knocking people who knit, I have the utmost respect. I cannot knit. Cannot. I don't know if it's a mental block because I started with crochet, but when I go to knit, it's like my brain just shuts down and goes, yep, there's nothing there. Nothing. So that is the only thing that I would have to recommend that you go to somebody else to learn, because I wouldn't do that to you guys and force you to learn from me. I can't even teach myself. It's awful. So awful. So other than that, if there's something else you want to try, I also do soap, the felting around the soap. And so we could do that one day and just talk about why it's a good use of felt or of wool and that kind of thing. But just let me know if there's some, or if there's a project that you really enjoy doing and you want to share it. Let me know that as well, because maybe we can have you guest speak on our meeting, or you and I can get together and we can plan something. We can work it out. So just let me know. Especially if you're a knitter, because like I said, I can't teach you that. Oh, I meant to ask earlier, I hope this fan is not making so much noise that it's hard to hear me. And if it is, please let me know and I won't use it next time. It is 87 degrees here today. It's supposed to get up to 90. And then tomorrow it's supposed to be 70. But it's so hot and our air conditioner is just not sounding happy. So we're trying to avoid using it as much as possible. Because maintenance is delayed because of everything that's going on. So I've got a bunch of fans running, and I hope that one's not too loud for you guys. I really do. I did mean to ask that at the beginning. And then, of course, I saw a shiny ribbon and got distracted. I told you guys that was like me. All right. Oh, we might actually end on time. Yay. Yay, yay, yay. All right, so let me show you guys where I'm at, because now you can really see that pattern. in the section that I've completed. Like I said, total, stab myself with the pin anyway. Total time for a 10 by 10 piece using 1/2 inch ribbon is about 3 hours. So if you were to use thicker ribbon, even on a larger piece, if you were to do a smaller piece with a different end in mind or a smaller frame in mind, it would probably take even less time. And even on your first go round, maybe it would take you 3.5 hours instead of 3. Because once you have the pattern down, it's very, very simple. And you can see that our boxes are starting to form over here. We can see where the boxes haven't formed and where I still have the weft. So this is, or the warp. So this is actually a pretty good step 1, step 2, step 3 look right here. Now, I will finish this off before I go any further down with my second weft, only because if I go further down, it's going to be harder to weave the weft in from this side, trying to go over these silver ribbons. And then the other problem is, if I go down much further, I don't have the diamonds as a guide, so I could end up making mistakes that I have to correct later. So I always will finish this section first before I completely finish my blocks. And again, so we did the warp. Well, first we did our grid, which my grid is, let me get the grid in there. Oh, up here you can kind of see the corner of my grid. So first we did the grid, then we laid down our interfacing. We have the warp threads, the warp ribbons, which are just laid flat, pinned on both sides, using pins going in at an angle opposite to the angle of the ribbon. And then once we did that, we added the weft 1, which was the pink, and that was that 3-row pattern that we went over. Once that's complete, we go on to weft 2, which is going to be the silver or gray that I chose here. And that one goes in to the side-by-side diamonds, up to the next side-by-side diamonds, up to the next side-by-side diamonds, and so on and so forth. And that's the whole project. It's that easy. So this is why I wanted to share this with you guys today, because it was something that I stumbled on when I was at the Austin West Studio Tour last year with my Spinning and Weaving Guild. And there was another spinner there who had done similar projects to this that she had on display that I thought were absolutely gorgeous. And that was May of last year. Then I kind of got working on other projects and dyeing yarn and things like that for Spin and Dye in Texas. And I didn't have a chance to get back to it. So then this year, when I had some time, I started looking into it, and I realized that there just wasn't a lot of good steps out there online. I'm sure there's plenty of books, but I couldn't find anything online that I really, really loved, except for the one video I talked about earlier. That one was the closest to what I was looking for. And it's disappointing because it's such an easy thing. It's a relatively kid-friendly, slightly older kid, but it's a kid-friendly project. It's got so much creativity. You can do whatever you want with the colors. I've even seen ones where they kind of just go nuts with the color, and they still come out cool because of the illusion that's being created. Even when you mess with the colors a little bit, there's still an illusion. It just may be a little bit busier to the eye. Another thing to keep in mind is once you understand this pattern, there are different ways to adjust the colors that you're using in order to create new patterns using the same technique. So this one is the exact same technique we went over today, but you can see I have 6 pointed stars in there appearing instead of the boxes. Now, if you turn it, you can kind of start to see the boxes again, but this is the exact same pattern. The only difference is the way I laid out the colors. So once you understand how to do the tumbling blocks, There's other patterns that you can use, or play with the colors and see what other illusions you can come out with. Whew, I did it in an hour, guys. I can't believe it. I'm so glad. The people on Monday had to stay an extra 3 minutes. I felt so bad for them. But we did it on time. So thank you so much for joining. Please, if you are having a good time with the Quaruntine Fiber Group, make sure that you are subscribed to the Spin and Dye in Texas YouTube channel. Make sure that you follow me on Instagram. I do a lot of updates and reminders about videos on there. And you can, if you're looking for more yarn and things like that, Spin and Dye in Texas is on Etsy, and we are still selling yarn and fiber for spinning. So please take a peek if you are looking for something else to spin or looking for some other fibers to work with. And I will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Have a great day and stay safe and healthy. Bye.